How do you present your qualitative findings, especially if you use interpretative phenomenological analysis, which is called IPA? So imagine that you have collected your data, you have analyzed them, and now it's time for you to present your findings. And when it comes to IPA, you have to see yourselves as not only just a reporter of the findings, but you are an interpreter of the findings. So you view yourselves as presenting how you make sense of the data. And how do you do that? Especially when you are doing a dissertation where in chapter 4 or the fourth chapter, you have to present what you found, right? So in this presentation, I'm going to show you some of the things that you have to think about when you are presenting your findings. When it comes to interpretative phenomenological analysis, so think about it is you have given participants a chance to share how they make sense of their experience with you. And then after that, you also make sense of that information. So we call it double hermeneutic, right? So now that you have made sense of the data, you're going to present that information to your audience. And how do you do that? Especially when you are doing a dissertation where you have to write about what you found. So when you are presenting your findings, you start with overview. You try as much as possible to remind your audience about the purpose of your study or the objective of your study. What were you trying to find out, right? That will help people to also anticipate the answers to the questions that you have, or trying to find out whether you have accomplished the objective or not. So you present what the purpose is, and also you give them an idea about the list of areas or topics that you're going to present under the findings. So one example is that you can start by saying that the purpose of this study was to explore how healthcare physicians make sense of their experience. So that is the purpose. And then you can talk about things. In this report, I will be presenting participant a little bit of background information about the setting. I'm going to also talk about the demographic information and also provide a brief information about each participant to understand the unique experience of them. And lastly, I'm going to present the final theme, which is the master themes, meeting the purpose of the study or addressing the research question. So that's how you're going to present. Try it as much as possible to help your audience to understand what you intend to present to them. Right. So that's how you're going to present that information. So we start with overview. The next one is research setting. I indicated here that it's optional because it's not really required for you to talk about the research setting if it's quite related to the procedure, how you collected your data. But I recommend that you have this information. People want to, your audience may want to have an idea about how you collected the data in terms of your experience of collecting data from participants. How was your experience? And maybe you can also talk about your reflexive notes, right? A brief information about any information that will help your audience to better understand your findings is very important to present that information. It's a background information. And so think about it as like, from your perspective, how did it feel like collecting data from participants? So one example is that let's say you focus on primary healthcare physicians. Maybe you went to a participant private clinic office and then participant was available to talk to you after hours, right? And then they were open and shared the experience because you and them had a private conversation. Any information that will help you to understand the situation or conditions that are associated with how you collected the data is very important for you to share. So the next one is demographic information. Demographic information is very important. Important. People's background, experience, and identity may influence how they make sense of the experience. So in order for your audience to better understand participant experience in terms of the quotations, what is said, is very important for you to provide background information. Who are your participants? What are their agenda? What are their experiences? Where do they work? Right? Here you have to be very careful. You don't want to present any information that will be easy for people to identify who you talk to, but any information that will help your audience to better understand their story, especially when you are going to quote participant. I want to know what participant PT1 is when you quote the person so that I can put things in context. So providing individual characteristics or demographic information is the best way. But if you have a lot of participants, like if you have 30 or 35 participants, it's going to be difficult to present individual demographic information. So you can present it in a collective manner. Okay, most of them were female, and half of the participants were have experience above 12 years. Anything that you can present in a collective manner so that people will really understand who you talk to, that would be great. But the best thing, if you don't have a lot of participants, like you have up to maybe 10 to 12 or 15, it's very important to have video description so that people really understand the experience, especially when you are doing interpretative phenomenological analysis, where people's background, preconceived ideas, and experience can affect how they make sense of the experience. Right. So it's very important for you to provide that information. So as you can see, I have my 5 participants here, and I provided background information about them, their gender, their age, their years of experience, and also whether they work in the urban area or the rural areas, right? The next section that you have to think about is how you analyze your data, right? So this one is one of the most important session in terms of presenting your findings. In general, think about data analysis as trying to reduce the data so that it will be easily consumable to your audience. But as you are reducing the data, you have to show us how you did it so that your audience will be able to understand and also believe what you found. So the process of you analyzing the data, demonstrating or showing the process is so important when it comes to presenting your findings so that people, it increases the credibility of your findings. So in this case, you provide detailed steps that you follow. It's also going to be very good if you can cite a source of a book or an article or a researcher's steps that you followed. That will also increase the credibility of your presentation, right? Or of your finding. Focus on using already tested way of analyzing the data by previous researchers is the best way of showing the steps, right? So another thing that you have to think about is not only showing the steps, you have to also provide the outcome. When you tell your audience that you went through the data, identify information that are significant, and develop codes, right? Your audience wants to know what was the outcome? How many codes did you develop? Right? And giving a brief information about an outcome of each of the steps is very important when it comes to providing step by step or providing the data analysis process, right? I'm going to show you for IPA, there are about 6 steps that you have to follow. So the first step is to read and reread. And as you can see here, after that, I provided the outcome, right? So the outcome is that I was able to immerse myself in PT1 transcript, a recording, because I read I have gotten a complete understanding of participant experience, right? If you want to know more about how to analyze your data using IPA, if you click on the link here, it will take you to one of my videos that shows how to analyze your data using IPA. So the next one is initial noting. So the initial noting is, think about it like you are taking notes as you are going through the process, because when you're going through the data, reading and rereading, you may identify some information that is significant that you want to take note so that when you move to the next stage, the process becomes easier for you. You are reading, you are doing a line by line reading, right? So this means that you are paying attention to every statement that participant made, and then you are taking notes about the meaning. What does it mean? What is the person telling me? What does this information mean? And then what is the potential label or code can I use when I reach the stage where I want to develop themes? Or what is the potential theme that I can use? So this is where you document the process. And also when you describe this process, you also have to give what was the outcome. At the end, I got about 60 plus exploratory comments, right? And these comments can help you to move to the next stage, which is the emergent themes. So the emergent themes is where you go through the data again, identify information that are significant, and develop themes. Think about theme as a phrase in between 2 to 5 words representing your understanding of the information that you have extracted. So you have to describe how you came up with emergent themes, right? Sometimes based on the comment that you have already made under the initial noting steps, that will help you to come up with themes. As you can see here, at the end, I came up with 14 candidate themes or emergent themes for only PT1. I'm focusing on PT1 because I'm using, we call this strategy individualized strategy. And if you want to know more, there's a link here that you can click on and learn more about this strategy of analyzing qualitative data. So next is after developing emergent themes, I explored the characteristics of each of them and see whether I can cluster them based on the commonalities among them. And then at the end, I came up with 4 groups. And then at the end, there were 4 superordinate themes, right? So for the participant PT1, 4 superordinate, or we call it the overarching theme or the main themes, were generated based on the 14 initial themes. Then I repeat the same process for the rest of the participants. So each of the participants, I'll go through, take notes, develop themes, emergent themes, and then categorize them to develop superordinate themes. Then the last one is after going through all the transcripts, having themes for each of them, I examine all the superordinate themes and categorize them to form the 3 main themes. We call them master themes. So you see how you have to present detailed information about how you analyze your data so that people can follow and trust and can repeat the steps that you have provided. So after talking about how you analyze your data, the next step is to provide individual experience, how you make sense of individual experience. So when you look at step 1 to 4, at the end of step 4, you have superordinate theme for each of the participants. So this time is where you present each participant experience. So this is where you are going to talk about the superordinate themes for each of the participants. Participant PT1 has 4 superordinate themes. So this is where you talk about them. So imagine that you have about 8 participants. You have to describe their experience, how you make sense of the experience, right? And you do it for each of the participants. But you may ask, let's say you have 20 or 25 participants, will you talk about each of them? And if you're using IPA, it's recommended that you share individual unique experience before you talk about the overall experience. One way is to just write a paragraph or two for each of them so that your audience will better understand each person's experience or how you make sense of their experience before you talk about overall experience. Another option is that if you think that is going to take you a long time for you to talk about each participant experience, one thing that you can do is go to the main themes, the overall themes across cases, and then present that information. But as you are presenting overall, you can mention individual unique experience. Right. So you can also do that. So there is flexibility in terms of presenting your findings when it comes to IPA. You just have to think about the best way that you can present. You don't want to overwhelm your audience. At the same time, you don't want to lose the richness of the information that you gathered for participants. So there should be a balance. So my suggestion is that if you have up to maybe 12 participants, I think describing individual experience first will be very useful. But if you have more than 12 or more than 15 participants, then you can consider skipping this process and just talk about the main themes across cases. But as you are describing each of the themes, you can talk about individual experience. So you just have to think about it. And if you still want support about how to do this, I provide support to clients about how to analyze data. We can meet and have a discussion, and I'll be happy to help you to be able to accomplish your goal. If you are working on your dissertation and you're doing a qualitative study and you are stuck, I will be happy to help you to be able to successfully complete your dissertation. So if you have any issue about your research and it's qualitative study or a mixed method study, you can contact me. I'll put my contact information in the description section there, and then I'll be able to provide support for you. So let me talk more about this one. Since I have about 5 participants, providing individual experience first will be very good to your audience. So you can see here that I start with the first participant, right? And then describe how I make sense of the experience. And the information that you need, as I said, is ordinate themes that is connected to this particular participant. So what people want to know about this one is you can start with giving a little bit of background information about participant. You don't want to repeat what you have given under demographics, but any information that will help your audience to better understand how unique this person experiences, that would be great. So it's just like talking about the team, but at the same time describing how they experience the phenomenon. So as you are describing, you also have to think about your research questions because the reason why you went through the data is to address your research question. So when you are describing the unique experience of the participant, technically you are answering the research question that you have. So that's what you have to do. After describing the unique experience of each participant, then you go to the main findings, which is the theme, the main themes, right? As you can see here, I came up with the main theme across cases. So the 3 main themes here across 5 participants, and this is what you have to present. And for this one, it's expected that you define the theme. So when you're presenting each of the theme, you state a theme, define the theme. Definition means that you are describing or stating what the theme represents, considering the evidence that comes under this theme and also considering your research question. Right. So technically, you are defining the theme. One question that you may ask is, why should I define? You are defining because a theme is an abstract concept, right? It can mean many things. Burnout as a hidden erosion of identity. I can define it in different ways, right? But based on the data and based on the research question, what do you mean by burnout as a hidden erosion of identity? You define that and then you quote participant to support. Quoting is a way of helping your audience to give a life to your theme, to show that this theme is not developed from the air, it was from data. These are evidence from the data in supporting the theme. So bringing 2 to 4 quotes in supporting a theme is one of the best practices, right? And then you are not just quoting, you have to present what the quotation means. This is where you present your interpretation, because quotation, you are taking that information out of context. So you have to let people understand that information. You know participant more than your audience. You understand that information because you analyze it. So this quotation, what does it mean? So there are 3 things that you always have to think about when you are presenting your themes. Define the themes and also provide some characteristics. So defining the theme and provide quotation and then provide your interpretation about the theme. So these are examples. Because of time, I don't want to go through everything, but I'll put a link to the PowerPoint there so that you can get access to it, so that you see an example of how it's done. So you see here, I have a theme, and this is an example of a definition of a theme, right? And then you can talk a little bit about what makes this theme unique, right? How unique is this theme? And then you can quote participants, right? You see here that this is the theme, and then the definition of the theme. I provide how unique this theme is, right? And then you go ahead and quote participant, right? The quotation shouldn't be a lot, it can be 1 or 2 sentences. And then you provide your explanation of the quotation. This one is very important. Don't quote and just leave that information there for your audience to make sense of that information. You quoted it, so you have to define it, or you have to explain to your audience so that they will understand the quotation, right? And you have to indicate who said that. Right. Sometimes too, you can also give a little bit introduction in terms of who said it. So you can say participant P1, who has maybe 2 years of experience, who is a female, said this one. If providing that information will help people to put things in context or help people to understand what participant is saying. So after quotation, you provide your interpretation, right? And then you can also go ahead and provide the second evidence, right? And then you can provide your interpretation. Sometimes what you can do is that as you are providing your interpretation, you can link the first quotation to the second quotation, right? So that there's a flow of information, so that there will not be like isolation. And then this is the third one. So as you can see from the second one, let's look at the second one. So you see the theme is about hidden erosion of professional identity. And see the quotation, right? I still know how to do the job. I just don't know who I am whilst I'm doing it anymore. So you see here, it's so interesting that, so as you can see here, participant is separating his competence from his identity. Right. He has a skill to do it, but the sense of self is evaporating. A sense of self is just fading away. Right. So you see how you quote participant and explain and interpret in connection to the theme. At the same time, you are indirectly addressing the research question, which is how do they make sense of the experience of burnout, right? So that's how you can do the process. And then you go to the next theme, you do the same thing, you define what the theme is all about, you provide how unique is this theme, and then you can quote 2 to 3 participants in support of the theme, and this is what is done, right? So as I said, I'll put the link in the description so that you can get access to this PowerPoint. So after that, you go to your conclusion, right? So after that, you go to the conclusion. So the conclusion is all about recapping or summarizing what you talk about, the main issues that you talk about. It can be a paragraph or so, just to give your audience a brief information about what they have read. I hope this one was helpful to you. My next video that I'm going to do is about writing your discussion when using IPA. So I hope this one was helpful. Thank you so much for your time.